To the shooting in a police, or rather pizza restaurant, possibly sparked by a fake news story posted online about Hillary Clinton.
A gunman with an assault rifle targeting a Washington, D.C. spot that's at the center of a fake news story about Hillary Clinton and a close aide. Our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, is there in Washington and has all the details for us. Good morning, Pierre.
Good morning, Robin. This case shows how fake news can lead to a dangerous situation.
This all began after WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange released hundreds of thousands of secret documents detailing a backstabbing Clinton Foundation, but it now appears the real truth Assange was leading us to was hidden between the blurred lines of Hillary Clinton's campaign manager John Podesta's released emails. Fast forward past John Podesta's brother Tony's casual email exchange with thelemic spirit cooking adherent Marina Abramovic. The Rosetta Stone was needed next, a verification that high-level Washington, D.C. predatory pedophiles were using a code to communicate child sex trafficking as casually as ordering a pizza. An FBI unclassified document from WikiLeaks revealed symbols and logos used by pedophiles to identify sexual preferences, to include those who sexually abuse children as well as those who produce, distribute, and trade child pornography, are using various types of identification logos or symbols to recognize one another and distinguish their sexual preferences. Investigators should also be attentive to pedophilia symbols advertised on websites. During examinations of computer files, investigators should be conscious of subjects who try to conceal child pornography by labeling them with symbols instead of typical suggestive, explicit names. Thus, the interest in code words. Now, clues. The menu from Comet Ping Pong. Notice the symbol of the ping pong paddles and its clever resemblance to the FBI document's symbol for child love. All right, hang on, New York Times. Before you declare this fake news from your ivory tower, now look at the symbol for Besta Pizza, just 2 doors down from Comet Ping Pong Pizza, boldly using the symbol for boy lover as was recorded on the unclassified FBI document. The evidence begins to reveal that Besta Pizza and Comet Ping Pong Pizza may be competing for the lucrative Washington, D.C. pedophile market right out in the open. Comet Ping Pong owner James Alefantis needs to explain himself, and so he did, via the Hillary Clinton colluding New York Times. But so many questions remain unanswered. Why was this said by the band Heavy Breathing performing in Comet Ping Pong?
He likes the world sounds. Tamales.
And little boys.
And children.
I think I was his manager.
No.
We all have preferences.
Why is the artwork adorning Comet Ping Pong's walls at the very least so insanely creepy, especially for a family restaurant? Why is Alefantis so close to Tony Podesta as revealed in the WikiLeaks emails? And why does Mr. Podesta collect questionable artwork specializing in grotesque eroticism and pedophilic images, not to mention Podesta's dabbling in what appears to be cannibalistic rituals while continuing his old friendship with convicted pedophile Dennis Hastert? Why did you write #murder next to this incredibly creepy photo you posted? Why do you find it amusing that this baby is for sale? Why do you associate with this artist? Why is any of this okay? And if these code words are eventually proven to be just another method of communication, then why did the Podesta emails mention the code word pasta for either little boy or sex 78 times? Code word cheese for little girl 85 times. And what does Podesta's friend Herb mean by this statement from a Podesta email? P.S. Do you think I'll do better playing dominoes on cheese than on pasta? According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the FBI, 460,699 children went missing in 2015 that we know of. Mr. Alefantis, this isn't a witch hunt, and it isn't an attack from fake news that your boyfriend David Brock, founder of Media Matters, would have us all ignore. Either you are the unlucky victim of a fake news onslaught due to your own poorly initiated publicity, or a decades-old pedophile ring operating in the power-hoarding shadows of Washington, D.C. is about to be opened from your front door.
if you control the media, if you control the Justice Department, if you control the police, you own the system.
The gunman now in custody. CBS 2's Weijia Zhang with the story in Washington.
SWAT teams moved in Sunday afternoon after a man opened fire with an assault rifle inside a popular pizza restaurant in Washington, D.C.
One of the hosts runs up and is like, "Did you see that guy? You know, he had a big gun."
The restaurant, Comet Ping Pong, is in an affluent area of the city. Police say the suspect, identified as 28-year-old Edgar Madison Welch of Salisbury, North Carolina, fired several times, hitting and damaging walls, the door, and a computer. No one was injured.
The first couple of police officers had their guns drawn, including automatic rifles, and they were standing behind cars and taking aim. They seemed to be talking to the suspect, and after a while the suspect came out.
Police say Welch was self-investigating a false news story that circulated online during the presidential campaign that claimed Hillary Clinton and her campaign chief were operating a child sex ring here out of the restaurant.
Moving to the Central African Republic now, where the United Nations has identified 41 peacekeepers as suspects in sexual abuse cases in recent years. The peacekeepers are from Burundi and Gabon. The abuse and exploitation allegedly occurred in the CAR's Kemo region in 2014 and 2015. The findings follow a 4-month joint investigation by the UN and officials from Burundi and Gabon. The evidence implicates 25 Burundian and 16 Gabonese peacekeepers serving in the UN mission in the CAR, MONUSCO. It's now up to the two countries to decide whether or not to prosecute the suspected abusers.
Leaders of the European Union say they aren't concerned despite another vote against the EU, this time from Italy, amid a growing movement away from the idea of a unified Europe. Dale Hurd has that story.
European leaders insist the EU will be fine, even after the biggest body blow to hit it since Brexit, the British vote to leave. The vote in Italy was not intended to be a vote of confidence on the European Union, but it became a vote against the establishment and against the status quo, both in Brussels and in Rome. The vote was whether to streamline the constitution and give more power to the Prime Minister, but it turned into a symbolic referendum on the European Union, and the EU lost. This man who voted no said, "We could not go on any longer like this. The Italian people cannot take it anymore. If authorities don't understand, then slowly we will make them understand." Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi had promised to resign if the referendum was defeated. The vote has energized Italy's anti-establishment Five-Star movement and the right-wing Northern League. Italian bank stocks are getting battered, and it's feared the world's oldest bank, Monte dei Paschi, is now at risk of going under. Still, in Brussels, finance ministers believe the EU can absorb it.
I'm not going to comment on the what-if situation. Again, I'm confident that there will be no such crisis, and I'm confident that we have the means to resist to any kind of political shock in Europe.
But there are more shocks on the way. Europe is slowly but surely turning right and away from the dream of a European superstate. Soon, only Angela Merkel will be standing among the coalition of world leaders who pushed European integration. The man who could be the next president of France, François Hollande, has called for more French sovereignty. His likely opponent in the next election, Marine Le Pen, is rooting for an EU collapse, as is the leader of the most popular party in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders.
Of course, there is Euroscepticism. The same is true in France, in Italy, in Greece, in Finland. Different types of Euroscepticisms, by the way.
And it continues to eat away at European integration. EU leaders may be confident, but it's clear they're losing the confidence of more and more Europeans.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called for a ban on full face veils. Speaking at her Conservative Party's Congress, she said the Muslim attire has no place in the country.
In interpersonal communication, which plays a fundamental role here, we show our face. And that's why a full veil is inappropriate in our country. It should be banned wherever legally possible. It does not belong in our country.
Iris Bitzer is in Berlin. He says Merkel may have been pressured into calling for the veil ban ahead of federal elections.
The German Chancellor, for the first time, expressing her full support for a ban on full face coverings in Germany, the so-called burqa ban, like what there is in neighboring France.
A highly pathogenic strain of bird flu continues to spread to poultry farms across the country, despite the government's efforts to contain it. It's been found in 7 of the country's 9 provinces, and now it's apparently spreading from ducks to chickens. Our Kim Yo-sun has the latest.
The deadly and highly pathogenic avian influenza virus is now spreading from ducks to chickens within Korea's Chungcheongbuk-do province, the nation's cluster of poultry farms. Although nearly 1.7 million poultry animals have been culled in the region to prevent the AI virus from spreading further, quarantine authorities were only focused on preventing contact with migratory birds and duck farms. While only ducks died in the region during the early stages of this season's AI outbreak, local farms are witnessing sudden death of chickens. Reports on suspicious cases of AI are also continuing from chicken farms in the region, with a recent report filed in early December. These chicken farms are all within 3 kilometers of duck farms where the AI virus has been striving. With increased criticism that the highly pathogenic AI virus is spreading from ducks to chickens, the regional government stated its plans to set up 38 more mobile quarantine situation rooms, including sterilization stations, to a total of 77 distributed across the poultry farm clusters in efforts to prevent the virus from reaching other farms and regions.
Atrocities are happening in Myanmar, which could be considered genocide. The Myanmar military began a full-on offensive that's still going on in northern Rakhine State, which is a black zone sealed off from aid workers and international observers. There have also been unlawful killings of unarmed Rohingya men, along with allegations of mass rape of Rohingya women and girls by army soldiers. The civilian government and military continue to block access to affected areas. According to the UN, authorities are denying at least 130,000 men, women, and children access to food, nutrition, and health care. 30,000 are likely displaced in the blackout zone, and an estimated 3,000 children suffer from severe acute malnutrition.
Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak has led a rally against what he calls the genocide of the Muslim Rohingya minority in Myanmar. Najib said Sunday's protests in the capital Kuala Lumpur sent a strong message to Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi that enough is enough. He also said Suu Kyi's government must stop the bloody crackdown in Myanmar's far western region, which has sent thousands of Rohingyas fleeing. The plight of Rohingya in predominantly Buddhist Myanmar has galvanized Muslims in Southeast Asia.
Clashes have erupted between Bahraini protesters and security forces in the wake of a court ruling that upholds death sentences for opposition activists. The confrontations occurred overnight in the village of Ekher, where security forces used tear gas against the demonstrators. The protesters threw firecrackers at the Bahraini troops and torched tires. The new violence broke out after a court of appeal upheld death sentences against 3 opposition activists. Another court in the capital, Manama, condemned several Bahraini nationals to life in prison and handed down 15-year jail terms to several others. They are all accused of their alleged involvement in a bombing that killed a member of Al Khalifa's security forces and an Emirati officer. 8 people have been stripped of their citizenship on similar charges.
So the nationwide candlelight protests have been going on for several weekends now, and they are considered quite a different sight from the rallies of old. They're peaceful demonstrations calmly calling for change. But what do the protests look like from a foreigner's perspective? Here's our Shin Se-min.
Patrick Border is a retired American judge who was stationed in Korea while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces as a young man. He visited Korea from his home state of Hawaii multiple times over the past couple decades. But over the weekend, he saw an extraordinary scene right here in Gwanghwamun Square, something unthinkable in the Korea he served over 40 years ago.
I was astounded by it. I've never seen that many people of a single mind in the same place at the same time in my whole life. And it was convivial. People were very peaceful throughout the whole process, but they were also very purposeful.
These are political protests in Brazil that have been called by the same right-leaning activist groups that pressured for the removal of the leftist Workers' Party president Dilma Rousseff. But their leaders say that Rousseff was just one problem and that fighting corruption is an ongoing battle.
They have been doing this for a long time in this country, but the people woke up and will no longer allow that these kind of things happen ever again. We are awake. Impeachment is over, but the Brazilian population will not fall asleep ever again.
Brazil's corruption investigations, like the car wash probe into illegal dealings of national oil company Petrobras, have already brought down and even sent to jail several top politicians and business people. And some here believe the political establishment is trying to weaken the investigations with a recent vote of an anti-corruption bill by Congress, which some people here perceive as actually an attempt to limit the powers of judges and public prosecutors.
The fact the bill was voted while Brazil was still in shock because of the plane crash that killed 71 people, including most players from the Chapecoense football team earlier in the week, led many to see this as an attempt to use the tragedy to divert the attention from a very unpopular measure.
Barbed wires stretched across roads, security forces guarding the streets is the common scene in violence-torn Indian-administered Kashmir. New Delhi has imposed restrictions in and around Kashmir's summer capital Srinagar to thwart a march planned by the pro-independence camp. Dozens were detained, including chairman of Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, Yasin Malik, as they tried to march the roads leading to the city centre.
What sort of democracy is India? We are not allowed to hold peaceful marches. India claims Kashmir its integral part, but it has killed, disappeared, maimed thousands without justification. People of Kashmir are demanding freedom from Indian rule, but New Delhi does not recognize our rights. We intend to continue this struggle peacefully.
Authorities have also kept other pro-independence leaders under home arrest to prevent law and order problems. Since the killing of pro-independence leader Burhan Wani in early July, the region is undergoing one of the most difficult stages of its independence movement. Over 90 people, mostly youth, lost their lives in police action on the street protests since July, while hundreds of others have been blinded and wounded. In order to contain almost daily protests in the region, police has detained thousands of youngsters, many of them under the infamous Public Safety Act. The highly criticized act allows detention without trial for up to 2 years.
Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has criticized the United Nations over its aid appeal for the country's northeast. UN officials have doubled their target for international donations to $1 billion. But Buhari says they're exaggerating the troubles just to raise money. CCTV's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
The scale of the need in northeast Nigeria has become clearer only in recent months as government forces have driven back the ISIL affiliate militant group Boko Haram. The UN and aid agencies have been reporting regularly on what they found, and on Friday they gave their latest assessment branding northeast Nigeria the biggest humanitarian crisis in Africa. Well, they say 26 million people are affected, 8.5 million in urgent need of humanitarian aid, and the UN is calling for $1 billion for 2017 from international donors. That's clearly annoyed the president, Muhammadu Buhari. He says the UN is blowing the crisis out of proportion purely for financial gain. Buhari's statement is a rare public sign of disagreement between the UN and the government.
According to the State Department, this fake U.S. embassy was being run by an organized crime ring with members from Turkey and Ghana, including a Ghanaian attorney who practiced immigration and criminal law. Now, they were allegedly issuing legitimate but fraudulently obtained visas and birth certificates for about $6,000 per document. The operation was successfully shut down a few months ago, the State Department said recently, after an investigation that was coordinated by the Assistant Regional Security Officer investigator at the real U.S. Embassy in Accra. Now, the local police force and the Detectives Bureau, along with other international partners, carried out several raids and arrested a number of different suspects. And during those raids, authorities also discovered a fake Dutch embassy. They also found and seized other authentic as well as counterfeit visas to India, South Africa, and the Schengen zone, plus 150 passports from 10 different countries, a laptop, and several smartphones. It seems the ring was bribing corrupt officials to either look the other way or supply legitimate blank documents that could be doctored. And that's according to a statement by the State Department that also described the fake embassy. It reportedly flew an American flag in its courtyard and was open 3 mornings a week for about a decade until this recent bust. But authorities say it's still unknown how many people have illegally entered the U.S. and other countries using these false documents.